But during the course of that discussion conducted by my friend from Texas, he said, quote, if you go back to the 1940s Nazi Germany, look, we saw in Britain Neville Chamberlain, who told the British people, accept the Nazis, yes, they'll dominate the continent of Europe, but that's not our problem. Let's appease them. Why? Because it can't be done. We can't possibly stand against them. And then he went on to say, I suspect those same pundits who say defunding Obamacare can't be done. If it had been in the 1940s, we would have been listening to them. They would have been saying, you cannot defeat the Germans. I resoundingly reject that allegation. That allegation, in my view, does a great disservice for those brave Americans and those who stood up and said, what's happening in Europe cannot stand. When the ship was turned back and the passengers on that ship were sent directly to the gas chambers, when Czechoslovakia fell and the slaughter continued, there were many who raised their voices. And then there were those who went to war because of the barbaric and great threat to civilization and everything we stand for. Amongst them were my father and grandfather. I do not agree with that comparison. I think it's wrong. And I think it's a disservice to those who stood up and shouted at the top of their lungs that we cannot appease and that we must act. And we did act. And it's a disservice to those who did act. Now, I spoke to Senator Cruz about my dissatisfaction about his use of this language, and he said he only intended it to be applied to pundits and not to members of the Senate. I find that a difference without a distinction. I find that something that I think I had to respond to. I do not begrudge Senator Cruz or any other senator who wants to come and talk as long as they want to, as long as they can, depending on the rules of the Senate. But I do disagree strongly to allege that there are people today who are like those who prior to World War II didn't stand up and oppose the atrocities that were taking place in Europe. Because I have an open and honest disagreement with the process of not agreeing to move forward with legislation which I agree with, which was passed through the House of Representatives, and comparing it to those who were the appeasers, as Senator Cruz described them, is an inappropriate place for debate on the floor of the United States Senate.